My name is Laura Opp and we're in Columbus, Ohio. Right after college, I went to college in Illinois and I went to high school in Oklahoma. And I knew I wanted to experience a different part of the country. So I looked at Peace Corps, and for a lot of reasons that wasn't feasible for me at that time. So then I started looking at AmeriCorps, which is sort of like the domestic Peace Corps. And I actually discovered a program out in Seattle, Washington called Washington Campus Compact. And what that does is place AmeriCorps members in colleges and universities to work with college students on service learning projects. And that really appealed to me because I'd done some study abroad when I was in college, and I'd spent 3 months in Argentina and then 6 months in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And while I was there, I was in Argentina 2 weeks before September 11th occurred, and I got back to the States just a few weeks before they had their government collapse and the changing of 5 presidents, and just a lot of turmoil in that country. And then shortly thereafter had the opportunity to live in Tanzania for 6 months. And so that experience really taught me a lot about, experiencing another culture, and it was just a great opportunity, and it made me think a lot about how educators can help young people process those multicultural experiences. Being there around the time of September 11th, people were really very gracious, and you also realized the influence that the United States has on the rest of the world. And so for me that was really an opportunity to sort of explore some issues of identity around just being someone that's from the United States, and what that can mean in the rest of the world, and sort of the power that can wield, and what it might mean to be empowered in terms of giving that back and using it more responsibly. I'd like to see some big changes in our education system, and another component of my volunteering in Seattle was with the Seattle Youth Tutor Program that worked with kids that lived in public housing, and it brought in tutors to help them out with their homework, and those kids would come after school, most of them every weekday, for a couple hours and just work on their homework, and they were very smart, bright kids, and because they have that particular really well-run program in there, they're going to do well. But it really does get you thinking about, the amount of resources that our children are entitled to and maybe don't get. So I would like to see just a ton of resources available to youth, and a lot of opportunity for them, and maybe that they can go to college and take out student loans and then not be saddled for decades by those loans, especially if they decide they want to be teachers or occupations that are critical to our country but don't pay so well. One of the young girls that I worked with when we started would always say, "I'm not the kind of girl that likes math," make comments like that. And by the time we were done, she was doing 8th grade algebra. She was in the 4th, I think by then she was starting the 5th grade, and she was saying, "I'm a math whiz." So you see these transformations, and I would never say that I'm 100% responsible for it, but I was one more adult in their lives that was rooting for them, They lived in subsidized housing communities. A lot of them were first-generation Americans that were children of Rwandan and Sudanese refugees, and many had lost family members and had very, very painful stories. But also had very involved parents and supportive parents who wanted to see that these children, these first-generation American children, really be successful and live a better life than they did. So the kids were amazing. They'd be, we couldn't open the doors until everything was set up for tutoring, and they'd be sitting outside, tapping on the doors, wanting to come in and start their tutoring, start doing all their work. So it was a great experience. It's a fabulous program. My recent volunteer experience has been more about just sort of taking care of my own neighborhood. So around campaign time, I did voter registration drives and just made sure that everyone in the neighborhood, that we had these routes, and just made sure everyone in the neighborhood had been offered a voter registration ballot and had the chance to turn it in. I also did some emergency response training, which is for community emergency response. It's called CERT, and that's to make sure that if for some reason there was an earthquake or a disaster and emergency services couldn't get to us within 3 days, we could maintain our own community. Well, it started when I lived in Seattle, and I'm a Midwesterner, so it's the first time that I've ever been enclosed by mountains and ocean and only a northern and southern exit. So it kind of occurred to me that, and there are earthquakes in Seattle. It occurred to me that something like that could happen, and that I'd like to have resources and knowledge at my disposal. So that's sort of where my energy is going right now, is just thinking about within, a 2 or 3 block radius of where I live, what are the needs and what small things can I do to make sure that they're being taken care of. Here in Columbus, part of it is just keeping a 3-day food and water supply and encouraging your neighbors to do that as well. And I've been trained in doing triage and some basic medical procedures. And a lot of it is just around sort of organization, disaster psychology, and I think it was like a 30-hour training, so I'm not an EMS now, but it was just sort of a basic course on how to help out your neighbors, and a lot of it is honestly how to make sure your own self is sustainable so that you can be of help to others. Well, a lot of it was that dawning of, if something happened here, it is more feasible than in other places I've ever lived in my life, that it would take a long time to be able to get help. And then off of that, sort of the idea that I would hate to have to shut down my house, and only be able to take care of myself and just turn people away. And so I thought, well, I want to be prepared enough that one, I can take care of myself, and two, I can take care of my neighbors, and not have to make really difficult decisions if a disaster struck. I felt like this administration has done a really good job of asking for action from the citizenry, and so I feel kind of paradoxically excited that I'm being asked to do more, and ready to do it. So it's just been interesting. It didn't feel like an ending when the election ended. It didn't feel like, well, now I don't need to canvass or do phone calls or have lunch with my neighbors, because there's still so much that we want to do. And also being here in Columbus, I really do feel like we have maybe the tools for a more diverse discourse, that we can actually really see everyone's strengths, and I feel very positive about what we might be able to accomplish. I'm willing to volunteer in the schools and work with my neighbors, and I think a lot of what I've already done is really feels less like volunteering and less like service and more like just being part of a community. And it sounds small, but I think that's all it takes, is for the majority of people to do that, and I think the majority of people will. There's a lot of challenges in the world right now, and I'd like to see our generation really step up, and my generation and the generation younger than mine really step up and be able to have sort of an amazing tale to tell our grandchildren about how times were really tough and we were able to hand them a world that was better than the one we grew up in. And right now I feel really optimistic that 40 years from now that's the story we'll be telling. It honestly, it's great to be able to look at people younger than me and feel excited about what they're going to accomplish. It seems kind of unique. I think people older than me looked at my generation and were very worried. So, yeah.